It is 6:30, and I'm going to be gaveling the meeting into order. First order of business is an executive session. There are 2 and possibly 3 issues, I believe, on for the session. So first order of business, is there a motion?
I'll move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a labor relations agreement with employees and civil litigation would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a labor relations agreement with employees and civil litigation under Title I, Sections 313, A1B, and E of the Vermont statutes, and invite Town Manager Eric Wells to join both discussions, and Planning Director Matt Boulanger and Town Attorney Bariah Smith join the discussion concerning litigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. executive session. We're back in open session at 7:06. And next on the agenda would be the minutes from March 19, 2024. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of March 19th, 2024 without any necessary corrections.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Hearing no modifications, all those in favor of accepting the minutes say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next on the agenda, public comment. This is the time that the public may make comments and speak on any issue, whether it's on the agenda or not. So is there anybody in the room that wishes to make public comment? And if you can identify yourself for the record.
Yes, thank you. I'm William Buffard. I'm the local president of the police union, NEPBA, the local 409. I just had a memo that I wish to read as the thoughts and expressions of the members of the union. I do have copies if you guys would like them. Just let me know and I can pass them out. In wake of the budget defeats which have rocked Williston and other towns throughout Vermont, we thank the Select Board and Manager Wells for putting in the diligent work necessary to bring this town forward. The members of the union understand the nuanced choices made to propose the town's budget and understands the cuts that may be necessary to revise the budget in order for it to pass. This process is arduous and labor intensive, and there's no way around it. Before I start, I would like to highlight that I am the second most senior patrol officer with 7 years of service to the town of Williston. 3 of our 4 supervisors and our chief are encroaching on retirement, and we have 1 officer with 13 years of service, 1 with 5 years of service, 2 with 4, 1 with 3, 1 with 1, and 2 officers with less than a year of service to the town of Williston. With that being said, I strongly urge the Select Board members to avoid, if possible, to make cuts to public safety. We understand that these cuts are going to be necessary, but this town is growing and developing at an exponential rate in the amount of residences, in the amount of businesses, and the associated traffic volumes associated with both. This means that call volume in public safety is increasing in tandem with that said growth. Historically, we've seen on average about an increase of 10% in calls a year over the previous year. Last year, from January to April 2nd, our call volume was up 47% over 2022. I don't have the figures for this year yet. That increase of last year was also while we were understaffed, and we have been understaffed for the whole year. In 2023, the town contracted its third own police staffing level study in the last 30 years, and the 4th study to address the police staffing if we include the 2009 regional police study conducted by the Chittenden Regional Planning Commission. Each of these studies have consistently highlighted the need for greater staffing levels. These studies all outline the benefits and trends that occur with adequate staffing, and the latest study warned about the pitfalls of ignoring this data. We worry that a misstep of the failed initial budget proposal will be akin to not acting on any of the recommendations or any of the data from these studies. This part is particularly frustrating post-COVID, amidst a period dubbed the Great Resignation, where stress and fatigue is affecting all careers, but is especially rampant among first responders. Headlines across the country read recruiting woes or retention issues, but I assure you, these are the least ominous ones. Others reference deaths in the line of duty or current suicide rates. I struggle considering cuts among public safety after the last 2 years of hard work strengthening retention and morale in the police department. This work started with the members, but was propelled by the work of Manager Wells and this select board. I fear that cutting the public safety budget will limit the equipment that is desperately needed, inhibit growth of the department, causing a stagnation of personal development for an otherwise young membership, and cause fatigue to grow again. But worse, I fear, is that it will look like we have undone the support that this town has managed to retain employees and draw applicants during this hard time. I worry that morale will take a downward trend, which will compound on all other problems. Lastly, I worry, although making cuts to public safety may be an option, doing so will send a clear message to those working in this field, and one that we may not recover from. Again, the members of this union are aware of the challenges that the select board is facing, but please keep in mind and consider everything I've outlined here. I hope that we can work together in unison to move the town forward in the right direction. And if there's any questions or anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board right now?
Yes, thank you for highlighting, the challenges of being a first responder. What can we do as select board members to help you retain officers and make your, improve morale? What can we do in here to help you?
Well, I think the last 2 years has been a good showing of at least a good start, a good baseline. But I think that's a very nuanced topic that I could spend at least an hour on itself. At the very least, if you guys wanted any personal input, we're always open for ride-alongs. We love to have people jump in cruisers and see what we're doing immediately.
I think I'd be afraid if we were doing a ride along, we'd be making your job that much harder.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Did you leave a copy?
Yeah. Are there any other public comments for tonight? Eric, is anybody online?
Nope, no one online.
Okay, all right. Next on the agenda, Chittenden County Communications Union District update. Eric, if you give some,
Yep, well, Representative Mike Vance will take the lead here, but just to remind the public and the board, this is a communications union district that the town and I think 7 other communities voted to form back in 2022. This is a separate government entity working to create universal broadband access, utilizing funds from Community Broadband Board. The CUD itself has received, I think, over $2 million in state ARPA funding for this work. Mike, our representative, he has chaired the CUD for the last year. They're getting into a critical phase here, and we'll provide an update this evening and get some feedback from the select board. But just a reminder for the select board, this is a completely separate government that the town is a part of. The town doesn't have a financial a risk in this, as it's a separate entity.
Thank you, Eric. Well, I believe you all got at least a small packet that kind of outlines where we're at. For brevity's sake, the point of that was that we have come to a kind of crossroads as a group, and that is to whether or not to award a small portion of money to Consolidated and go forward, or to make no award and publicly back a larger bid that Consolidated would make when the BEAD funding comes out next year. If you don't know, BEAD is the big government handout. It's $249 million to the state of Vermont, $42 billion nationally. That's nowhere near enough money to build all broadband to all homes or even all rural addresses in Vermont, but it's a big chunk of them. Chittenden County and our members are in a very unique state compared to everybody else. We have almost no rural underserved customers. as I outlined. It's a roughly 700 or so addresses. So the amount of money we have from the ARPA funds is very small, and the BEAD funding would also be very small. It would require considerable extra funds to even build to those, and we have no fundraising mechanism, and we've not undertaken to be a business like some of the larger CUDs. It's not feasible. So where we're at in this crossroad is some of the towns want certain guarantees, and there's a obligation of universal service that if we start handing out money and getting involved in, there's no definite answers to how you get out of that. And we will be out of money by the end of 2025 with our pre-construction grant, and we have no revenue generation built into this system. The VCBB is not clear, and thus some of the members don't want to take the risk, because even though, like Eric said, there is no financial obligation to the town, the fear is ending up in a situation that, say, like Burlington Telecom ended up in. Now, they did some spectacularly unethical things, but in the sense that there are some CUDs that have already gone into the private capital equity markets through bond funding because they've already overspent and under-delivered, because this is an expensive proposition. And going it alone, once you get started, it's hard to stop. So from that standpoint, you know, we've all decided as a board, you know, we're at this point where we have to make some decision, and they're looking for feedback in terms of, well, how does the town see, knowing what you're now into, what we could deliver versus what that risk might be. And that's the unfortunate thing, there's no certainties here. So that's where we find ourselves. That's the update. We'll have to make a decision of some sort. If I were to gamble, I'd say we're probably leaning to back a larger scale BEAD fund than to award the ARPA funds, and that will alleviate us from any sort of financial burden or oversight burden, because as long as we don't start, we have no requirement of universal service. For the Willistonian at large, for people who live in neighborhoods like I do in Southridge, Brenton Woods, Finney Crossing, they will see no benefit of this because they are already considered served. Thus, none of this funds can be used to do that. If a carrier like a Comcast or Consolidated chooses with their own money to do that, they certainly can, but those are arduous costs above and beyond what they're trying to do to fill the needs of the people who are underserved. For towns like in the Northeast Kingdom, that's where the money is going. These are rural people who have no service now, and thus they are underserved, and they get larger and larger share of this pot. So from that standpoint, you know, not to belabor it, but how do you know, we're looking to see how the board sees Williston's kind of role in this and how they would see us proceeding.
Questions from the
So how many, did you say addresses weren't served in your?
In the overall of the 8 towns,
Right. Mm-hmm.
it's roughly 700 plus.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to be definite because the number is based on the state broadband map, and that map is a product of every E91 address combined with an overlay of every existing service provider's services.
Okay.
Number of things end up as E911 addresses that are not places people live. And thus you have to filter that out.
Right.
And that's an arduous task in itself. It's one of the reasons things have been slow. You're trying to mesh these maps, and we haven't engaged in that because making less addresses actually reduces your money. And it's manual, tedious work to do. And it's not worth the money we have to pay a consultant to do it.
So so the ARPA money that you do have is not enough to address all 700, and you're afraid that when you run out of that money,
Well, that
you'll
money,
have an
yeah.
obligation of some way.
The estimates are for Chittenden County, it's somewhere north of $20 to $22 million. So the $2 million we have is 10% from the one partner that's even got the feasibility to do this. It's like dangling a piece of bread to a shark. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
$22 million for 700 addresses?
Mm-hmm. Rough estimates at the broadband build, if you're building telecommunications network, new build, take a customer times $6,000, $6,000 to $10,000.
Right.
and then hope they don't have a very long drop. That's what's undone most of the state work, is that in places of the Northeast Kingdom, people have very, very long driveways. Then you figure like $1 a foot. And if it's buried, it's $28 a foot. These are inordinate costs to do this. And that's where the money doesn't go as far as you think. So it's easier if we were all pressed up against each other, because then for every mile you go, you get a lot of customers.
Yeah, but then Comcast would do it.
Exactly, but I mean, that's how it kind of, unfortunately, it's a volume play.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's 700. Not all of those customers are in Williston. The bulk of them are in Underhill and Jericho. That's where the largest is. There is a fair bit in Williston. It's spread out: Williston, South Burlington, Essex, and then Westford. There's another chunk in Westford.
Mm-hmm.
And as we do nothing at the moment, Consolidated, as you've seen along the roads and stuff, they've been out building anyways. And that's something that happened after the CUD process kind of kicked off. I think Consolidated was motivated to get into this market for fear of losing to something else. So that's something that changed the landscape of all this in the first place.
I don't usually like to have opinions when I know all of 7 minutes worth of information, but.
It's a really boring and complex
No, but if
topic.
you have a drop in the bucket and you know you're gonna need a whole lot more money, I would be, as it feels like you guys are too, very hesitant to put my toe in that water until you have it. I mean, if you were telling me it was gonna take 3 million and you only have 2, that would be a different story, but if it's gonna take 20 and you only have
Yeah.
2,
The problem is the people who they need to build to are at the end of the line.
sure.
So you have to build everybody else who get to the end of the line. So if you're from a standpoint of them, they're not going to pass these people and do nothing. So
Sure.
there's, you have to do all this to get, and that's where the costs kind of multiply. If we were talking 700 people in on like a neighborhood,
Yeah.
then 2 million might get you near it, but not in the way this lays out. Geography works against us.
Be cheaper to give them all a Starlink subscription.
Yeah, and that's also been a player that's changed the landscape. However, the state, the Vermont Communications, VCBB, and those groups do not view fixed wireless as meeting the BEAD fund. The BEAD grant will be minimum of 100 meg over 100 meg, and Starlink can't deliver that. It's been purposely written to kind of push out fixed wireless. There's a view that there's some work, the VCBB and their goals are different than, say, just getting people broadband. There's a larger kind of social play here. They're building state-owned infrastructure more than they are just delivering broadband. If it was that, it'd be a little simpler. We wouldn't have these districts. We wouldn't do all that stuff. But nevertheless, this is where we are. But people do take up Starlink, and that has also cuts the numbers down. Because even though you build it, it doesn't mean people actually buy it. Take rates are around 20%. I'm working for other CUDs up in the Northeast Kingdom, CV Fiber, Maple Broadband. They're building to 100% of the addresses, but the take rate, 17 to 25%. So you spend all that money, and they need a return because they're building that. So it's just because you bring it doesn't, it's not the field of dreams. They don't come. So that's where we're at, and that's the risk we feel we don't want to expose the two. But we recognize in doing nothing there are some optics that publicly people go, you had this money, why didn't you do it? And that's a fair criticism. And that's where we're at.
Other questions or comments? So what are you looking for from us tonight?
Just whatever the general opinion was, and no opinion is an opinion. It's a very, very difficult thing to kind of wrap your head around if it's not something you do. But it's just, this is, from the standpoint of the Williston residents, the number of addresses, a number are in construction anyways. Whether we get everybody in construction will only happen if someone like Consolidated gets a grant, because the one thing the grants do is they kind of force the hand of the provider into building everything. Without a grant, they will probably build some over time, but they will skip the most difficult and expensive addresses just because that's the way it happens. And so we wouldn't, I saw even in Front Porch Forum this week, someone was asking, about it, and I don't comment yet on those things because I don't have a specific answer to give people. But if I were to give it publicly, it's always like, go to Consolidated's website and sign up anyways. Put your address on the list. They're a very simple creature. They see addresses. The more the addresses they see, the more money they know they can make. They'll make a business case for it. So, anyways, that's where we're at.
It's definitely a difficult position. I mean, and I really am so grateful to all of you on the board for kind of piecing through this because, you know, I do feel that broadband access is imperative in this day and age. And, you know, the reason we wanted to form the CUD in the first place was because we recognized that and we really wanted to support the efforts to get, you know, not just Willistonians, but you know, all folks, you know, in the area, that access. It does not sound like right now, though, that with the ARPA funding, that is going to be a reality. And so,
If the ARPA funds could do it to all the unserved addresses in one shot, I think the board would be more, less concerned about getting started. It's the lack of certainty there, because weirdly, the community union district now has to fulfill a role of oversight. We have to become a layer above the Vermont Department of Public Service. And there isn't a pathway to not be that oversight. And that's the problem, is financially, we have built no revenue into this system. There's no, you know, we're not like NEK Broadband, which collects a portion of the bill that goes to them. They actually have operating capital. Without revenue, we can't, you know, you essentially exist in a level of customer service. Someone says, oh, my broadband is slow, and you said it was fast. And when the company says, no, it's fine, and they disagree, that's when they go typically to the Department of Public Service. But the district is forced into the middle of those two things once they've established a grant and handed it out, and there isn't a clear path to an end there. You know, they haven't said ultimately it would be there's still legislation being written. This is a bit of a flying airplane with no wings, and they're building the wings as they go. And I realize in the modern climate, maybe airplane analogies aren't so great, but there isn't a clear, specific roadmap to how this is going to go. They're kind of figuring it out as they go. And because we don't have a revenue model in place, it's hard to get started because we dip our toe in and we own it. Whereas if we just sit back and write a letter of support, the onus will be on the operating company that takes that grant, and that might be a better place for us. But if that would have been something, if you had read that package, said, you know what, do it anyways. And most everyone has kind of taken the money and done it anyways. Everyone's kind of full speed ahead, you know, damn the torpedoes, not worrying about it. That's something we take. You know, we have our next meeting is our annual meeting. That's, you know, if someone, you know, something's got to shake the tree to get people to kind of go, okay, we're gonna do something. But
Good luck.
yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I expected.
If you want help spending that ARPA money, we have some ideas.
True. I bet at the moment, if no award is given, it does go back to the VCBB, which it's absorbed into the larger, and it will be used, believe me, but
Yeah.
you know, it will be used for the kind of greater good, but not in the town good. You know,
What does the CCCUD acronym?
Chittenden County Community Union District,
Okay.
lots of C's.
When you're talking about the Northeast Kingdom and things.
Oh yeah, each one has its own name. There's about 8 or 9 of them. So, with that.
yeah, I mean, it's a tough decision for you all. I don't admire you having to make that call, but, you know, obviously, you know, we see statewide the, you know, fiscally, you know, what's on the
There's enough
horizon.
momentum in the system that I think they're going to get there anyways. And the BEAD money will be an enormous leap forward when that comes out in 2025. And I think everyone will get there one way or the other. But partially when everyone voted, there was kind of this idea that we voted for this, we've chosen it, and tomorrow it will happen. And even if all the money was there, tomorrow it won't be happening.
Yeah.
I mean, at the company I work for, we've been trying to build all our customers, and I've heard, we'll be done in 5 years for the last 10 years. So it's very, very difficult to visit every home in Vermont, and with, this is like doing it all over again. That took 100 years to do the first time. It's not gonna happen in 2 years.
Totally unfair to even ask this, but, so the BEAD grant money comes out in 2025. What's a hypothetical timeline for that grant to then?
So the BEAD grant will have, there'll be the bidding process and awarding process. That'll probably move about pretty quickly. The VCBB is the kind of, is the writer of the rules. The rules have to be approved nationally, and they'll hand that money out. And for companies that apply, they'll have to have skin in the game. So the onus on them will be to provide realistic timelines. In the timelines we were working with the kind of proposal we have now, half of it would have been ready for installation availability to customers sort of towards the middle to end of 2025 as it sits. Okay. And then I would imagine, 2026, 2027 kind of timeframe. The goal of the VCBB, and again, the whole 5-year thing, when they started, was to have everyone built by 2028. They have a kind of a built-in self-destruct mechanism on the VCBB that I believe by 2028, they're not funded past that. So it's an unrealistic goal, but that is kind of where their goal, that's where their minds were thinking, that everybody in the state would be done by 2028. They won't get there, but they'll be closer then than they've ever been, ever. And it is a bit of a moonshot. And in the 25 years I've been doing this, there's never been kind of the funds for rural broadband like there has been now. So I don't think every person will have the service available to them, but you will never have had a time where we were that close before. And that's where we sit.
Thank you.
No problem.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So that does bring us to the next item, fiscal year 2025 budget revote development discussions. Eric, if I could ask you to make an introduction to that.
Yep. Yeah, provided the board a memo that walks through a number of topics. So kind of what we have lined up tonight, I'll go over timeline initially for some discussion. I'll walk through kind of the scenario exercise we put together with some different benchmarks, look at some possible reductions at a high level here. We have invited both of our public safety chiefs to provide the board and the public with an update on demand for services and provide reminders kind of how operations flow in those departments. So we'll have that, and then the thought is after that the board will get into a discussion, and staff's looking for direction to kind of narrow in on the target here to help this budget revote proposal get formulated here. So it's kind of what we have outlined for this evening. So I can kick things off with kind of talking about timeline at this point. First page of your memo kind of goes through what we talked about last meeting. We're here on April 2nd, kind of talking about this narrowing the targets, getting some more direction to staff. Then thinking if you want to meet next week for a special meeting to kind of work and get things kind of in a point where you'd like to have a public hearing on that draft for April 16th. And then following that public hearing, hold a special brief select board meeting, most likely later that week, kind of do your final work following that public hearing on the 16th. Then the board needed to take formal action to sign the warning, so we would prepare that with whatever the final number looks like. And then thinking about potential mid-May revote, there's flexibility on these dates. We looked at the 13th and 14th. The auditorium at the school is available on the 13th, so I saved it for then. And we received word today that the Armory is available on the 14th. Those are just placeholders for start discussion off here. A couple logistics, I was talking with the town clerk about this more. So the timeline, you think at town meeting, we usually have the ballots, you feed in the tabulator, you have to get those printed. There's a high demand for printing ballots right now based on, number of school budgets especially that are looking for additional votes. We're waiting to hear from them kind of what their truncated timeline is, but to think about that logistically, there needs to be lead time to print those ballots if you want to go that route. The other option is you can do a paper ballot. It's a simple check yes or no, but those have to be hand counted as that component. So part of the conversation, but just kind of in the back of your minds to think that,
Probably more feasible if it's just a one vote, right? Just the budget. We haven't had the discussion, but I haven't, if we decided to postpone both bonds, a yes, no vote on one vote is pretty easy to tabulate.
Yeah. So those are kind of logistically the options. You need to schedule the space and get the things to run an election together just as all part of this kind of the nuts and bolts component. So maybe I'll either pause there if you want to discuss timeline now, or we can look back at that at the end here as well.
Okay, let's do the timeline, the decision between the 9th and the 10th for next week was, you said the 10th was preferable, or the 9th, I can't remember.
Yeah, the DRB has a meeting scheduled in here on the 9th. We tried to find a suitable location for them to move and haven't had a huge success with that. We're into other conflicts. So if the board was able to meet next Wednesday, can meet in here, and the DRB could keep their meeting here. It's your prerogative. If you'd rather meet Tuesday, the DRB can cancel their meeting or try to find a location that works. I just have to let them know by tomorrow.
So the first question is, do we force the DRB to move because we want the room? Or do we actually just choose another day? So it's kind of
10th works for me.
In my opinion, we're either we get to be bullies for no reason, or just choose another day. It's a close call.
If this was the public hearing, I'd want to keep it on a Tuesday, but since it's a work session, I think I'm okay with Wednesday.
Wednesday will work for me.
Okay.
So I think all the other issues that are relative to the budget are probably going to be that easy tonight.
Yeah.
Is what we just did there.
But on the timeline, I have a little bit of a concern with the vote on the 14th, because if the school district does not get a passing vote on April 16th, they're likely to be the 14th, another vote for them as well. And I just, the amount of confusion with voters trying to separate the two pieces of their property taxes, I would be reluctant to have that vote on the same day. So that's my only concern with. And we can't go later, because the problem is they probably would prefer to be out a week or two, but they're not going to cause the town to have two votes in 10 days. They'll pull it in. So
If we push our vote, I mean, like,
you have to pull it in.
it would be, even if we pushed it to the 21st or something.
I was thinking you pull it in, because they couldn't possibly be ready on the 7th.
Right, so we would have to do the 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look for the 7th and thinking kind of that week of the 16th, I mean, you can make a final call, seeing how what happens on the 16th with the school budget as part of the information for finalizing your warning, and whether it's the 7th or say it's a week earlier on the 7th, that just truncates things just for the outreach component. You still have about 2.5 weeks away after warning it for the public outreach component of it. Depending what we learn for getting the printed ballots back, you might get a little bit closer on that and may need to just weigh the hand vote. But all these are factors to think about here.
The hand vote would be an option, so the 7th would be an option. I agree with Gina. I feel that we really need to work hard to separate the school budget vote from our town budget vote. And if that means pushing that up to the 7th, then I feel like that's what's in our best interest for our town budget.
Maybe we could see how far we get next week, and if it's, if we're pretty well done, then ready to go, that would be more feasible. If we're really struggling, then maybe it's not feasible.
Yeah, I know the board had talked about holding a public hearing before finalizing the warning, so deciding if you still wanted to build that component in, if, kind of how this timeline would be amended. But we can make any, you know, on a staff standpoint, I think we can make the 7th or the 14th work. It's your objective, how you want to proceed.
And we wait, I mean, would it be too late to wait until the 16th to make that decision? I mean, is that, like, if we wait in to see how the school board, or school budget vote goes on the 16th to make that decision? We are meeting that night.
People can go vote and then they can come to our public hearing.
There you go. I mean, I'm guessing we will not have you know, by the time we're meeting on the 16th, we'll not have the final decision there, but.
I think part of it is, you know, deciding how far advanced do you want the public to know the date is set.
Yeah.
If you wanted to wait until that week to decide on the 7th or 14th, depending on the other outcome, that's 2.5 weeks to the 7th from that point, or 3 weeks to the 7th from that night. But you know, it could be.
We could communicate the
Messy.
7th right away, right?
Yeah.
We won't have a number, but you could communicate the intent.
Right.
Yeah. So I think you can make that option exists, that week of the 16th, you know, make that call after seeing what the school budget, what happens there. You know, we can get the warning and everything in place that needs to happen. It's more of what do you want to do for noticing the public and the timeline you want for that to occur.
How does the Williston School Auditorium, you know, is being reserved on the 13th, is that a flexible date?
Yeah, good question.
Well, and the armory
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
I guess more importantly than even the auditorium.
Yeah, we haven't inquired that yet, but we can do that tomorrow. And I can report back to the board on that.
I mean, maybe we can make, I mean, I'd like to know how the school budget is gonna go, but maybe just in terms of timeline for getting word out, we could make that decision, as you mentioned, like maybe next week, as we're working through this and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we won't know the results of the school vote until probably late on the 16th.
Right.
You have to commingle the ballots
Yeah,
and take them to what's
right, so maybe it just makes more sense to just next week, see if we can,
Yeah.
if we're making progress enough to have it vote on the 7th.
Let's hope to do that, but if not, we can make the decision the week after that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll check it on availability.
Yeah, and that will also have an impact.
Could always look at other locations, but that, people are used to that. So that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, I get concerned about changing locations and not giving people enough lead time.
Mm-hmm,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
we'll follow up on that. So now I can jump into numbers a little bit, and I'll share my screen for this here. So let me give me a moment.
Really appreciate that you went above and beyond the ask too, in terms of.
Not a problem. Okay, there we go. So the board tasked staff at its last meeting to kind of run different threshold scenarios to be thinking about here. So as Greg mentioned, I had 2 or 3, and then we pulled some other scenarios here as well, just to show different ranges. So I'll get into the spreadsheet in a minute, kind of talk about the progression, what we put together there, but this on page 2 of the memo is kind of the snapshot of what these different threshold scenarios look like. So this table, our FY24 budget is here, and these are different possible bottom lines of the budget. So the number that wasn't supported at town meeting was the 15.35. So this next column talks about a % reduction from that town meeting budget, and that's on the expense side of the budget. So different percentage points here. At the bottom, you know, the requests from the board to show what a level funded budget would be. So we did that both for a dollars amount and an inflation amount. 12-month inflation CPI February to February was about 2.4%. So that, we built that in there just from a scenario standpoint. So then the next column looks at, okay, what does that mean in dollars for reduction? Then we go back to, compared to the FY24 budget, what percentage increase are these different scenarios? So as you recall, 9.84% increase in comparison was what was considered a town meeting day. Then there's associated dollar increase with each of those as well. So I shared this, and we'll get into, we'll go into revenue in a minute here, but just gives you kind of an idea dollars wise and percentage wise what each of these are talking about. What I'm asking the board to consider tonight is to kind of hone in on what range target we're looking at, and it's an expense and a revenue component here. So I'll get back to that. So what we did as an attachment is we put together kind of some possible reductions to be thinking about. And what we did is I worked with department heads with Shirley to look at things that would be possible to defer, trying to have a limit on service the best we could. You know, some of these things are certainly capital equipment, thinking about that, if we could get a little more time out of some equipment as well. Looking at our different spending lines, tried to get around 1.5% for each department or so. There's a couple variances of smaller departments, different things here, but so we've flagged, I'll say as part of this list, there's some things in reviewing the budget that I want to bring to the board's attention. I know that may not be the most popular decisions. I'm not recommending one way or the other for these, but just to flag with spending reductions, I've included the fireworks on the 4th of July. That's a cost of over $12,000. Could look at donations potentially for that as an alternative to think about. Wilson and Bloom landscaping, flower planting around town is about $10,000. We also have outside services, the community organizations funds that's granted out. We have $32,000. We increased that line about $2,000 this year. Those are the small grants to nonprofits that the board's committee awards each year. Lake Iroquois, we provide them $10,000, and that's primarily helping with their greeter program. It's a state program for the boat wash and the greeter down there.
So just to clarify, that's not just somebody saying, "Hi, this is a great lake." I'm glad you're here."
Yeah.
That's somebody who's
Looking
saying, "Hey, is your boat clean? You're not going to bring foreign species from your boat into the water."
Yep, trying to curb the spread of invasives, in which that lake certainly has had a concern with invasive species. And then bring up the Environmental Reserve Fund. Again, it's $40,000 in the budget currently. There's board had discussion on that throughout the budget formation process, but raise that as a number, as a point of discussion. But for I'd say the other items on here, we've worked at the staff level and confident working with department heads that these are things that could be backed out of the budget as you look at this. So this includes the debt service, those two bonds that were not approved at town meeting. We were talking about, a bond is a way the town takes on debt, and that expense wouldn't be hitting our budget. It's a repayment of that debt. So that first year, we would have been making an interest payment on those two bonds if they were supported of about $20,000. So we can back that out if the board's not planning to have those revotes at this juncture. Or to think about if you're thinking about maybe putting one back up in November, we could leave some money in there, but smaller details as you think through this. So all those parts at the top of the spreadsheet is just over $300,000, and includes those things I mentioned, like the fireworks and those other reserve funds. I think if you back those items out, I highlighted here, $220,000 reduction just to start with those other items. Then we talked about the new major items in the budget. Those were new positions. The 18th sworn police officer for half the year. The intent there would be, once that was fully staffed, to move someone into the detective role from an incumbent officer. We're down 2 positions right now. We're hoping we can fill those, and I think most likely scenario is getting someone in 2 folks in the police academy in August. We need to hire someone to be trained through the academy. There's a February academy, so that may be the timeline we're looking at, but we would need funding for that 18th position to have them in the academy there. HR director position, we budgeted that for an October 1st start date. The board removes that from the budget. Just thinking about maybe building in something left for some additional consultant hours to aid in HR as we look at that in the future. And also the police body cameras and less lethal taser devices with a lease payment built into the operating budget as well. Another major item. Those major items in there are just over $200,000 in the budget. And then as you get into looking at these different scenarios and benchmarks, you have to start thinking about services at a certain point. If you're talking about a level funded budget or an inflation budget, or even cutting 5-7% from the operating budget, we can do this look to defer some things, but at a certain point, there's only so much you can do before you need to scale back your services in order to hit those funding benchmarks. So just for illustration, as looking at scenarios, if the board were to decrease the COLA to non-represented staff by 0.5%, it's about $17,500 for each 0.5% reduction there. We budgeted 5.5%, similar to the step COLA structure we have in collective bargaining agreements in town for consistency. Delay filling open positions right now, just as an example, open positions at the fire department, if you delayed that the first quarter, $85,000 in savings. I'm not recommending we do that. It's just showing an example as you think about further levels of reduction. And then finally, if you're talking about reducing services by eliminating staff positions, each staff position, we've run kind of a blended estimate number, but the benchmark to use is about $96,000 per FTE. That includes salary, benefits, retirements, payroll taxes, kind of a fully loaded position. So if the board were to look at, for the level funded option of keeping the same bottom line dollar amount we had from last year, we're talking about, you reduced it by everything on this spreadsheet. To get to that number, you probably need to reduce the town staffing level by 8 full-time employees to get there, and that certainly creates a different service delivery environment, just to illustrate it based on that scenario discussion. So I'll just briefly go through kind of the revenue side as well. A reminder, a cent on our tax rate raises about $215,000 in property taxes. We're projecting a flat grand list growth in FY25 as well for a number of reasons. We've reviewed the revenue budget. We're not suggesting any additional revenue be projected for service fees right now. As a reminder, we increased our local option tax revenue by about $500,000 after we analyzed our prior year's actual receipts, looking at how to build that projection. And it's only a look back for those local option tax as well. We don't have the data from the tax department to help model looking forward. We kind of use that, what we've seen in recent quarters, and help build in a growth factor as well. Halfway through this fiscal year, we've brought in about $2 million in local option tax, and we've currently budgeted about 4.1 for FY25. If there's ever a shortfall in this local option tax received, the fund balance would likely need to account for that shortfall, depending upon other factors as well, if there were line items underspent through the years. Our fund balance in our latest audit's about $3.6 million. We try to project out what we're going to use from that for this fiscal year, next fiscal year, to try to have a rough estimate. If the town did need to use all of that, conservatively, what would be left? And that estimate is, the ratio is about 16.5%, how those things would move.
Eric, I thought the audit ended up, maybe you just said this and I just heard it a different way, but we ended up like $100,000 better.
Yep.
So we could apply $100,000 and be making the same decision we did 2 months ago, kind of, as far as what's left.
Yeah, the fund balance grew, the unassigned fund balance grew by about $100,000. Looking to Shirley, but right.
She's going to tell me it was 92. But if it was 100 and we were comfortable with it before, we could make the same decision, be comfortable with 100, additional 100. Okay.
Yeah, but just say every year's different too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Just as a benchmark, what we just went through, and we also projected in this number additional local option tax, then budgeted to help build that into this carry forward for the fund balance ahead.
Okay.
It's based on the health of the box stores as well, correct?
Well, this was an update to the looking backwards, so.
Right.
So the assumption that we didn't have an audit when we made the first guess, so now it's better. Going forward, yes, it's based on the health of all the rest.
And that's, you know, it's used to budget a deficit, which the town has for many years. The town's budgeted revenue from the fund balance to be used to balance the budget. It's been historically used about, you know, at least $500,000 each year for tax reduction. That's gone a little bit up and down the last couple of years, but you know, we've gotten this cycle where we've brought in more local option tax, and we haven't had to use that fund balance. That fund balance is still there. It's a rainy day fund. It's a tool for the board to think about, but it's, you know, it's ultimately one-time money. And, you know, we've been in the cycle a little bit right now, but it is a finite account that can go up and down. So just to factor that in, you think from a policy level.
But just to be clear, we're not changing any policy decision. We just have $100,000 of found money that we could apply to our big problem that we have right in front of us right now.
Yeah, the policy decision is what you want the range to
Right,
fall into,
right.
and what your comfort level is.
Actually, are the fund balance policies between 10 and 20%
10 and 20% of the operating,
of the operating budget? Right now, it's
16 and a half or so. And, you know, this model is, I can put on the screen. We make assumptions with this too. So there's the audited statement. There's what we've budgeted in FY24, our current budget year for tax reduction. We've transferred that in the capital. So that gets us to our estimated fund balance for June. So then we built in an additional $350,000 for local option tax revenue over budget. A couple of other moving pieces built in, and then, oh, actually $200,000 per the audit is what the increase was. So what we did here is we know we had budgeted, I think it was $3.6 million for local option tax, and $2 million halfway through the year, we felt it was comfortable to build in that projection a little bit more. So then what we try to do is show what we think it's going to be at the end of this fiscal year, and then reduce it by what we've put in the budget, and then to see where we'd be at the end of 25. And this is where we haven't had to use these funds for the tax relief in prior years, because we bring in more local option tax, or we've underspent lines, so it grows. So we take this as a conservative approach to try to model this a year and a half ahead of time. Then we take this number and run it towards the budget proposal to get that ratio to give you what that looks like. So there's a lot of moving pieces that could happen here. This is just a model, but try to help you from a policy perspective think, you know, where could this go if we had to use all of it in the budget, and just all of it, not more if we didn't get the local option tax revenue we projected as well.
But to your point, if we that $100,000, we had already kind of established that we were comfortable with it being at 16%, and so if we used that $100,000, we'd still be at 16.4%, and that's $100,000 we don't need to take from somewhere else.
Like property taxes.
Yeah, so, right there, we can add that in and say, that's $100,000.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
You got it.
The Government Finance Officers Association, their recommendation is 2 months worth in your fund balance of your operating budget. So we're right there right now with that estimated fund balance. So that's just another way to look at your fund balance.
Nobody wants to do this, but we don't want to be cutting personnel either, so, it's a.
I don't really consider the fund balance, I know what you're saying when you say it's one-time money, but it kind of isn't too. I mean, one-time money was ARPA money or a grant that is a one-time grant that you use to hire employees, which is a really bad idea. This isn't that. I mean, this is a balance that goes up and down depending on what the sales tax and all the other local options tax, not just that it's hard to predict, and therefore it should not be relied on. But it's not to say that it doesn't get replenished. Sometimes it's more than we thought it would be. Sometimes it's less than we thought it would be. So it's not the same as taking like ARPA money and saying, okay, we're going to spend this on salaries.
Yeah. The way I've looked at it the last couple of years too is to think, okay, we're using this for budgeting a deficit. We're plugging in this from the fund balance. Say say, depending where the fund balance level is, you don't want to keep that same amount the next year. Say we had $600,000 and then, okay, this is dipped below that ratio. We only want to put $400,000 in there this year. But to balance the budget that was built in, so there's a $200,000 gap in that revenue source that would have to be made up somewhere else, whether through property taxes or expense reductions. So just using it as a balancing mechanism in the budget, it can have those variances, so that has to just get picked up somewhere else.
It sounds like you're recommending not to use it.
No, I think, it is a rainy day fund for the town. I'd say this is a stormy
Rain-
situation.
It's a pretty rainy day.
Always. It's a comfort level for the board within your policy, and just knowing that these things can affect the future, but what degree of risk do you want to take to
What type of risk does the town have that we have a storm and we have a lot of, water damage and we need some extra money? What are the chances during the course of a year that we?
And it's that bad and there's no FEMA money? I'd say slim. Right? I mean, you have a $2 million problem in your town, there's probably money coming at you. I mean, a lot of our towns are dealing with that right now, so.
I mean, I think I've been very clear that I feel most comfortable when our fund balance is closer to that 20%, but I think this is extenuating circumstances right now. So, yeah, I mean, I would support putting in that extra $100,000.
So then just to close out the numbers here, looking at it from a taxation standpoint, this table in your memo looks, our current rate's 30.3362 cents per $100 of assessed value. For that median home value is $300,000 in town. Our FY24 current year median home tax is $1,008 for that home, or $84 per month. Each cent the rate increases is about $30 per year for the same median home, or about $250 per month. So this kind of pulls here, looking at the overall budget increase year to year, what that expense reduction from the town meeting budget would be, and then just replacing that, looking what the tax rate would need to be. If your expenses are going down, you won't need to raise as much in taxes if you're just looking at on a 1-to-1 ratio right here. And there is a typo here. This 2.4% is really $1 million. I transposed the number. So the expense reduction is this number. But so for the board's exercise, say you wanted to have a 2-cent tax rate increase target for next year. So that's this column. So increase your taxes 2 cents. That would be the estimated rate, the amount raised by taxes. That would mean you would need to reduce the spending side of the budget $435,000, or a combination of expense reductions and new revenue sources. So if you're talking about using more from the fund balance or local option tax projection, that's where that gets baked in here. Your magic number is $435,000 to get there. So looking for your direction tonight, kind of where you want to land on those attributes. And I can pause here and turn things over to our public safety chiefs to walk through their presentations, and then have a discussion.
That'd be good. Let's do that. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. There's an eclipse Monday, just want to give a bit.
What?
Change the tone of the dialogue.
Means things are getting dark.
Go in your closet, shut the door for 3 minutes, and come back and turn the lights on, you'll be all set. The good thing is I'm not a novice in budgets. This is my 38th one, probably 40 I've done in the last 37 years as a police chief. And I've had the ups and downs and the failed budgets and going back to the drawing board. But what we're going to do tonight, myself and Sergeant Eric Shepard, is just over the past year what we've been doing and highlight our calls we've been doing, what the problem calls are. As mentioned earlier, the police police detective's position that has much discussion is already in the budget. It's already in our chain of command. That position's been there for years. What we do is, when we're moving somebody into a new a position that's vacant, we need to backfill that position. So that's what the 18th position is. We currently have, as mentioned, is that our authorized strength is 17 positions. We have myself, the chief, we have a vacant lieutenant's position that we're in the process of filling within the next month, 4 patrol sergeants, and then complemented by patrol officers, and to include our comfort door person. Each day shift, we try to comprise of a sergeant plus 3 officers at different times of the day. The beginning part of the week, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and every other, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and every other Wednesday. 2 officers come in at 7, 1 comes in at 8, and another 1 comes in at 11. They work 12-hour shifts. At the other part of the week, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and every, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, it starts, 3 people come in at 7 a.m., then we have another person comes in at 11, so we have overlapping shifts. And then the night shift is covered by a sergeant. On the beginning part of the week, the Sunday, Monday, Tuesdays, is a sergeant plus 1 officer, and at the end of the week, it's a sergeant plus 2 officers. We do this based on our calls for services, and we've done it using heat way of identifying calls, so we know where our workload is. So we don't really need extra people out there. So over the last few years, we've seen numbers going up, especially ever since the pandemic. Some of the highlights this past year for 2023, and we do ours on a calendar year, January, December, for our calls. And this past year, we transitioned our dispatches into Essex PD. So pretty much anywhere from 18 to 20 hours a day, there's 2 dispatchers on. They share work between both agencies. We finally filled our vacant 3rd full-time position. So that has really helped us out. So if Essex is busy and we're slow and they need more people, our dispatchers work with the Essex dispatchers, and vice versa. If we're busy over on this side of the river, Essex shares the dispatching duty. So it has worked out good. We enjoy it. The communication, the radio system is working good. The unfortunate part is our cell phone services in this area of town, so that kind of creates a problem. But we're working on that. We're working on that. Since I've been here, this coming October, I'll begin my 8th year here. Shortly, in a few weeks, I'll begin my 38th year as a police chief. This past January, I began my 48th year as a police chief, which I started back in 1977 in Burlington, Vermont, walking Church Street when Church Street was Church Street. But again, budgets change. It's a way of life of running a city or a town. But crime is consistent. We're fortunate to have all the big businesses here to assist us in our taxes, but also it draws a certain type of element that keeps us busy. This past year, our calls for services, and what we do is we separate. Some departments combine all their calls, so whether or not it's somebody 911, somebody calling about a box award, a traffic incident, or a traffic stop, it's all combined, but we separate our calls. So our calls for services this past year was 7,581 calls for services, and our top 5 calls for services were traffic stops, suspicious events, and this is it could be a combination of things. If somebody calls up and says, "Hey, I think there's something going on in my neighborhood, but I can't really tell," we generate a suspicious incident for that. Till we get there to decide what it is. If we know it's retail theft, it's categories of retail theft. But we have public assist, people calling in, my car's locked, I left my keys in it, those type of things. I misplaced some items. Agency assisters, we share a lot with our neighbor communities, Essex, South Burlington, Heinsberg, Richmond. We assist down in Richmond and in the state police. And our alarms, our burglar alarms, which is high. Our offenses are actually what we rely on a lot is our retail thefts. Last year we had 433 larceny combined, petty larceny and grand larceny, 117. Our arrests on in-state warrants were 89, and that stat is nice to know that, you know, there's warrants that will make a lot of arrests, but the way the system is working, depending on time of day you arrest them, decides whether or not they're going to go to court that day, or they're going to get locked up that night in a correctional facility, or they're going to be so-called cite and release. Means that, you know, give them a citation, it's like an arrest, but they got to be back in court the next morning when court opens up at 8:30. So our biggest uptick this past year was driving while under the influence of intoxicants, 82 this past year, and violation of conditions of release. When people go to court, they're arraigned, the judge issues conditions. There's a bunch of conditions. I think there's 14 or 15 conditions. Most of them are, you know, make sure you keep in touch with your lawyer, you show up to court when you have to come back, and maintain, you know, whatever. We're trying to get them to do a little more on those, but that's a process in the legislators this year. Also, we had 806 arrests last year, and those are actual physical arrests where we charge somebody. And again, retail theft was the #1 category. 256, 90 again were arrested on warrants. 73 were arrested for DUI and also for conditions of release and unlawful trespass. And what we're doing, most of that is people that get charged with retail thefts or some crime in the businesses. The businesses wants them trespassed. This is not something that we do. We're like the mediator on that. It's the business that's trespassing them, and they put their name on it, they put their business on it, they tell us how long they want it, and then we're like the conduit of it. So a lot of times people get trespassed from Walmart, Best Buy, and it means nothing to them. So they get, you know, so, you know, a day begins with these type of crimes as early as this morning. It started at 4:30 this morning. Some days it's 7 o'clock. Some days we might get to noontime before we get our first call for retail thefts or trespass or, you know, violation of conditional release. And they go as late as 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. It's a constant thing. There's really no downtime when you're dealing with that type of crime. So that's one of the things why we're hoping to get extra people and fill our position, so that position of detective / BCI can do follow-up work and work with, you know, businesses and try to come up with a better solution. During the Christmas holiday, we invited all the businesses here and the town manager and sat down with them and explained how we function, how we work here, and what we need from them, because a lot of the businesses don't call us anymore. Most of the calls when those businesses are getting theft taken, it's the general public, people in the parking lot, people that are in the register, ready to pay for their merchandise, and somebody's walking out with a shopping cart full of stolen property. We maybe have a handful of businesses that will call us. But so that's why we met with all of them and said, okay, if you're not going to call us, but you want to report it after the fact, these are the things we need. We need statements, we need the videos and all that. But we've actually had civilians go hands-on with people that rip the shopping cart out of their hands, knock the stolen property out of their hands, follow them, get plate numbers, get pictures, and so it helps us along the way.
Chief, if I could interrupt just for a split second. One of the things that we heard the last meeting was that a person here said that they talked to they saw somebody stealing from one of the box stores, and they called it the store manager, some official's attention, and that what they were told was that the police aren't going to do anything anyway. And I just wanted to be clear that that's not true.
Most certainly not true. So we are absolutely responding to things. One of the struggles that we're having is that we are taking action, and we're finding that these folks aren't showing up to court, or things may get delayed in the court system, we're finding that sometimes when we do respond, the stores are not always willing to provide all the information, maybe because they didn't witness the theft, or it was some third party that saw it and they may not have all the facts. So it may appear on the face that maybe we didn't do anything, but we did. We are absolutely 100% showing up to absolutely everything. We are doing a full and thorough investigation, and sometimes people get arrested out of it because we have enough for probable cause. Sometimes, unfortunately, we can't substantiate that. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer of time, and the stores don't always see what we do on the back end of the house.
Thanks.
What is the difference between a national business, like a Walmart, or I don't want to pick on any but business name actually, but and a local business difference on retail theft? Is it?
They're all treated the same way. Retail theft is retail theft, so we don't play favorites and all that. We've gone to, that's why we invited all of them. We went out and introduced, and asked them to come forward, and we had 40, 40, and all that. And we gave them packets of statement forms. We gave them trespass booklets. We told them exactly what we needed, so everybody is treated equally. So the mom and pop stores that has somebody go in there and steal, beer or food and all that, and they're treated the same as somebody walking out with a drill or a saw from one of the larger building companies.
What about the store policy of shoplifting? Do they have different policies between, the national?
Oh yeah, most of them do. That's why we're relying on the public most of the time to assist us. Some of the major stores, because of liability issues, don't want their employees to engage in trying to stop somebody where they will get hurt or injured. These people that we're dealing with, they don't. There's no cause for them to stop, and they go. They figure they can outrun us and get away with it, and so it's basically up to the business to decide what their priorities are. But we've seen that most of them have stepped up to give us the call and all that. We might get calls from somebody who is an employee there, but they can't tell us who they are, because of fear of being terminated or reprimanded and all that. So we have instituted foot patrol in the businesses, so the officers are informed to go out and walk in and walk around in uniform. We have other people that we allow our people, if they want to go in and spend a couple hours in plain clothes, go in those businesses. It's like having a playbook going to a ball game. We know who they all are. Everybody knows. The minute a description is given of this, one of our officers will be screaming out who there is and maybe know which way. They're not going out. A lot of them don't go out the front doors anymore. They know where the exits are. So again, it's an issue that try to beat us. They have a getaway car in the alleys. Most of the cars they're using are stolen, or plates not assigned. This is a daily occurrence for us. And some days, if we get one, that's a good day for us. Some days we're probably 6, 7 deep in retail thefts. And it's not just, do the investigation, it's the paperwork. An average arrest takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. And if it's a lodging, we're going to send them to, bring them over to Quora, bring them up to Northwest if it's a male, and Chittenden if it's a female. But go to Northwest, that's a 90-minute ride round trip, and that's not to include the time at the jail, because if it's busy there, you're waiting in line. Yeah. So, and that means that at a certain time of day or night, you police the town one body. And if the person's giving us a hard time, then you got to run 2 officers with them.
So it'd be accurate to say that, I don't know, the national stores are more of a shoplifting threat, or there's more shoplifting. I guess the thieves are targeting the specific stores. I don't know how to word it, but.
Oh, they are. They are. And again, that's a day for a different story, and to explain that. If you want to come in one day, I'll chat with you on that. But the thing is that most of the people we're dealing with that are stealing in these stores have addiction, either mental health, alcoholism, or drug. And probably close to 90%, it's an addiction to drugs. And they need to feed their habit so they know what they can get, and they can probably sell it on the black market and to get their fix for the day. But it's, you know, if we can just, and we've got stories where people are crying to us that they need that property because they need to get the fix, and we're not gonna give us a citation because I'm gonna go to another store and steal. They'll tell us right out. They don't hold anything back. So, the other thing we have is we do have a lot of traffic in this town, and we have 3 out of the top 5 busiest intersections in Chittenden County. And over the last, we did well during the pandemic because a lot of people weren't driving, so our crashes went down. But over the last 2 years, they've increased. Last year, we investigated 340 motor vehicle crashes, which had 26 individuals reporting injuries, which was an increase from the 243, so it was 100 more accidents, crashes, from 2022. And then in 2021, it was 315. So again, you know, this afternoon, prime example, we had a 3-car crash in Williston Road and at Blair Park, and we limited that to 1 lane, and that was probably a 45-minute tying up 4 cruisers, 4 officers. That means there's nobody else patrolling the town. But again, you know, the busy, having more people out there, more officers doing traffic enforcement lessons, crashes, because people are worried that the police are out there. The other thing is that we are mandated by training every year. Vermont Criminal Justice Council mandates 30 hours of training for every officer, and they set priority classes you need to have. Use of force some years, domestic violence some years, fair and impartial policing. You always have firearms every year. You split first aid and CPR at odd, even numbers. The good thing is that we don't limit the training for our officers. I believe there's never too much training. And prime example is like last year, even though we were shorthanded, we had 678 total training hours for the officers. So it reduces your liability. And we try to specialize in training for the officers to give them something to do. You know, people like, you know, we're sending at the end of the month another officer to the drug recognition class, the DRE, which detects drugs in your system and all that. So that'll allow us 3 officers now. We got 2 people in field training this week, FTO training. So we have additional officers teaching our new people. We have somebody that went out to peer support school. We have a drug therapy dog that goes to classes. My administrative assistant, you know, the sergeant, and 2 of the officers went last year for a day and a half on recruitment and retention of personnel, because that's a big thing. How do we get edges on other agencies and to attract people to this town? By having a management study done that shows that over the next 5 years, we need more positions here. The town's growing, and how do we attract that group? So we've got some training coming up, some recruitment coming up down in Mass and parts of New Hampshire. So we're going to put the team together and send them out and see what we can do. You know, we've got a good incentive here by offering the hiring bonuses. That's a little, you know, carrot for us, but there's other things we need to look at. So hopefully, every time some agency outside Vermont advertises, I grab the job description and see how we can better all that. And next week, Sarge and I are going down to a vendor show down in Mass, and they'll have booths there for recruitment. There'll be people there from Mass Departments trying to recruit and all that. So we'll try to steal some of their rights.
We're gonna take notes for sure. See what we can't bring back.
Stand in front of
here.
their booth.
So just to give highlights about, you know, Eric here is our data collection. He does all my stats and all that, but he's come up with some interesting numbers.
You know,
just before I close out my presentation.
We're seeing, if we take traffic stops out of the mix, just looking at raw calls for service, I mean, from 2017 to 2023, we're seeing an 18% growth, just that alone. We're seeing over a 200% growth in arrests, and much of that is fueled by retail theft, but a lot of it by DUI and a bunch of other crimes that are in there, including warrants. Traffic stops are a whole different piece of this. You know, traffic stops are proportional to the amount of staff that we have and the amount of, what I'll say is more or less extra time. Not necessarily, but kind of is. You know, a call for service where we're getting a retail theft in progress. We are 100% going to respond every time to that. Sometimes traffic stops simply have to wait. So the folks that live in town, that live in the neighborhoods that are calling us up saying, hey, you know, we've got a speeding problem, stuff like that, that's proportional to the amount of staff time we have, and we really want to be attentive to that, and we want to go in the neighborhoods. We don't necessarily want just the speed cart. We want our cars sitting in those neighborhoods and people seeing us doing things and responding to their requests for us. And traffic complaints are certainly the number one thing that we hear from residents. Parking, winter parking, stop signs. Those of you who have been in town for quite a while can certainly appreciate all those things, and we want to be attentive to that. Started in 2009 here. I think we were authorized 16 at the time, and we're now authorized 17 folks full-time, and you know, the growth just in the last from 17 to 23 has been enormous. It's asking a lot of each individual officer. So when I look at the situation that we're in right now, I sit there and I get nervous because we really do need more people to combat some of these issues and to be responsive to the residents just as much as we are to the businesses. And that's not to say we're not in the neighborhoods. That's just saying, and because we absolutely are, that's just saying we want more time to respond to those. We would really like to be in those neighborhoods all the time if we could.
There's some pushback to traffic stops though, right?
There is, but being in neighborhoods doesn't necessarily equate to traffic
Agreed.
stops.
Agreed.
Sometimes it's just merely our presence is a deterrent for burglary. It's a deterrent for people who are speeding or who may be running stop signs. And I like us to
I always
just,
slow down when I see you.
exactly. That's exactly to that point. I want to be in the neighborhoods. Sometimes it does mean traffic stops. Education is a huge piece of that, and enforcement is a smaller piece of that. And that's why you'll see our speed carts will probably appear in the next 2 weeks or so. And I'll shuffle those around in the middle of the night with my crew, and they'll appear magically somewhere. And we do use that data to determine where we should be, so that way we're not making as many traffic stops in areas that don't necessarily need that.
Right.
So, to your point.
Yeah, it's a way of crime deterrent, marked unit in a neighborhood, and it's a good way for community policing. During the pandemic, we dedicated streets to every officer, so each officer had a certain number of streets that they had to patrol during the pandemic, so they got to learn the neighborhoods and all that. And I enjoy going through that. You know, everybody sees me out there, but I enjoy rolling down my window, pull up to somebody walking their dog, and chat with them and all that. Community policing 101. So that's why we got them out of the cruisers and going into the businesses now to offset that. So you know, I don't want to take too much time, but the other thing Eric mentioned, the town manager, is that the cooperation between us and the fire department. You know, we have an excellent working relationship. We work together. We show up on calls together when we are needed. We got their backs and they got our backs, and it makes that partnership really good. So we appreciate those guys when we need them, and we saw it a couple of calls we've had here. A couple of months ago, the serious crash down the road here at Monastery Hill. You know, we had everybody out there, even the state police. They heard our call, they came, and within an hour and a half, we had the scene diagram cleaned up. People that needed to go to the hospital went to the hospital, and you know, it's serious. It looked when we got there, but you know, it's not. You know, so everybody survived it and all that. But you know, even with the storms, the floods we've had, and all that, we network a lot. Really important for a community to show the relationship. So, I'd be interested in having any questions you want to ask or.
Questions from the board?
So 2 weeks ago, we had people in who were concerned about the number of cruisers that we have. Do we really need the numbers that we have? The 6?
We have a total of 7 marked units, and then I have 2 unmarked, or 3 unmarked. One sits there for the BCI position. One we use for, you know, court or doing, you know, training and all that, so we don't, but we divide, we have so many officers, we try to limit per cruiser, right?
2 people per car is generally what we do. So 7 marked cars, you know, there are sometimes when we have 4 people on shift, it's just a little over half the cars in use. We find that we try to have 50% due to usage on the cars, so they're working essentially 12 hours a day. Anything more than that, and it just becomes, you're racking up the miles so fast that you need maintenance so much faster. And then when a car goes out for maintenance, we have to use other cars in its place, and when we start racking up the miles on those cars, we've determined the most efficient way to do it is exactly that. 2 people a car, operating 12 hours a day. Any more than that becomes problematic for us.
That's helpful for sure.
And I have my own cruiser. The Comfort Dog has his because the dog. And it's not a new cruiser, it's a hand-me-down. So as we look at what cruisers we're going to replace, we look at the miles. We send the cruisers that we want to the auction. We get a good resale, back on them. So, it's not, we're not trading them in and all that, and then we just move them. So, wear and tear. What I tell people, there was a salesperson who I did business with down in Massachusetts for our cruises, and he always said, well, tell people that, when they bring their car home at night, leave it in the driveway, leave it running, and every 15 minutes go out there and open and shut the door. That's a police car. And that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. And how long you think that's going to last?
So if we defer purchasing one car this year, what effect will that have on the?
Well, we've been talking about it, Sarge and I, and we'll just go back and look at the miles on them. Study shows that when you're pushing 75 to 80,000, there's a lot of wear and tear on them. It's not just like replacing the tires, the brakes and all that. It's just the body of the cruiser starting to wear and tear. We use a lot of salt on the roads in the wintertime, so you have corrosion and all that, and it becomes a liability. If they're not going high speed every day, then you can get a little over 100,000 more on them. But the way they're designing cars today, 2.5 years, you're pushing 3 years. We did it during the pandemic, and we're noticing, costs are starting, for repairs are starting to go up. And the newer cars, then, the replacement, for them is not, it's not the $29.95 brake jobs you're gonna get. You'll see, a couple hundred hours. So, we look at what we got here, and we do our best. We constantly, we don't replace the lights every year. We try to get at least 2 cycles out of the lights in the cruisers, because by then there'll be a new style out, a new color out, and then that year. So by having, the auctions of the vehicle, we have that money that we can use to outfit the vehicles. So likewise with the data terminals, we have the computers in there. You get 2 cycles, maybe 6 years out of them before they break and they wear and tear, and the new computers are out, they're smaller, they're lightweight and all that. So again, it's that's why, next week when we go down to the vendor show, we'll see the newest things coming out, and we can plan, hopefully, some ideas after July 1.
My last one is I'm sure you know that the speed monitor on Old Stage Road hasn't been working for a number of weeks. And I travel that road almost every day.
I have to take the entire sign apart. Last time I downloaded the data from it, we actually had to bring the sign back to the office. And it is getting a little old, and unfortunately, the signs are in high demand, and ordering them is going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to try to bring it back and refurb it, and probably replace the battery that sits in that box. So yes, I do know, and it is definitely on the list.
I figured it was just so cloudy for the last month, it just
We try to order a battery big enough to handle that, because yes, it is very cloudy, and the winter time really does take a drain on those.
What time are you leaving?
One of in addition to the, kind of 18th position for the department, the other addition in this budget was the body cams. And so if you could just speak to the, kind of why body cams are important for our department to have, and I know you talked about it previously, but the fact that we are one of, if not the only department without them?
Yes. Okay.
So we
He's
are,
done research.
we are the last agency in Chittenden County without body cameras and without tasers, which is a less lethal option. They are a liability reducer for us and for the town. They are a liability reduction for the officers, and when there's questions as to what happened, it really makes it easy. It's nice to have those to go back and say, this did happen or this didn't happen. And part and parcel with that, same in the line item are the tasers, and I think I've spoken to you guys before. We've had a couple of folks get injured on duty that those could have potentially cut down on. It's a liability in terms of insurance. It's a staff issue as well for us, and it's a safety issue for us. So those are really, really important. And I don't know how Chief feels about this, but I'll say this: I would rather something else come out of the budget. If you guys said tasers and body cams, need to go, or we need to find a reduction, I would much rather look somewhere else. That's how important it is to me, working the road at night when I know that there's only a handful of officers on duty, and when I need help, it may be tough to find folks. So I need some stuff to level that out.
And eventually, the state's gonna mandate it.
Yep.
There's talking to legislators and all that, so I get it, stuff down our throat and all that. We're looking at grants, again, but we're a small agency, and it's not just, local, it's, state, federal, local, tribal, and all that, and there's a lot of police agencies, and there's very little amount of money out there. So, we've had situations, and more recently, we're seeing where, it would be nice to have that. And, the way we're outfitting it is that we're not buying everyone their own tasers. We buy so many of them, and they check it out. So it's the way we, checks and balances on them, so we know, they're not playing with them and all that. But, again, we have in-car cruiser videos when we do traffic stops, but it's nice to have that. We've had situations where, it would have been nice to see inside the place when something goes wrong. So it's a liability, reduces our liability, and makes everybody happy.
Great question, Greta.
Chief, my only question is the opiate situation, and for that matter, I guess legalized marijuana, the DUIs, are they still, back in the 90s, it was almost all alcohol. We're in the 21st century now. What are we seeing? And a separate but related question about overdoses and the interplay between the police and the fire department on that.
Well, everybody carries Narcan. Everybody has them on their vest, in their cruisers. So if they usually have one, maybe two units to take with them when they go in. We're seeing where we're getting there and they're coming out of it. So, less uses, I'm not sure what they're using and all that. But we're not getting where we, at the beginning, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, it seems like every day we're doing overdose therapy and all that. With the DRE, driving while under the influence of drugs, the old days, marijuana, or maybe pills. Looking at the lab, because I read the lab reports every day, every time I get one, then I can sit down with the officers. It's amazing what these people have in their system. It's not just marijuana, it's cocaine, it's methamphetamine, it's heroin, it's fentanyl. And that's just one person having everything in it. It's like a cocktail of stuff and all that. And these people are on the road. These people are on the road that can go off the road, run head on to somebody, and it's amazing. And that process takes anywhere from 3 to 6 hours to get, if they don't cooperate with us, we have to get a warrant and get the judge and all that and get the hospital to do it. But the old days when, people used to smoke marijuana in the confines of their house and then get out and drive and maybe had a 6-pack going with them, that's all you would find. But now it's amazing. Everything, pills, coke, fentanyl, xylazine, and so it's a mess out there.
Thanks. Other questions?
So this is a tough one for me. I really want to support this detective. I want to get this detective in the budget. But one question that just kept coming up that I couldn't really answer, and I think it's probably because of all the focus right now is on retail theft. Like, if these people are just getting released and we can't make a dent anyway, what's one more officer gonna make a difference? We need to wait until the laws get fixed or something else changes, because otherwise, if we're just arresting these people and they're getting right out, why do we need to do more of that?
And you go after the head of the organization and take the head out, who's talking to these people to go out and steal for them, give them a list of stuff they need to steal and all that.
You know what, that's exactly why I supported this in the first place, was that story, because I think that that's really powerful. I think if we're going to keep this in, we need to be able to say more than this is someone who can,
You
you know,
should've-
follow up or something.
People
It
should
needs
have
to
come
be
in
like,
3 years ago, when we had a storage bin out there, and we kept it here for 3 years with over $100,000 with the stolen property, and we didn't get prosecution out of it. And we had the AG's office, the state's attorney's office, trying to work with us. They tried to form an organized crime task force. That didn't happen because somebody left and went on to another job and all that. We're trying to get that, but again, when, you know, every agency has shortages and all that. But it's not just the retail theft, it's the drugs, it's people coming in this community. A month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, we took down a guy at gunpoint in the parking lot of Dick's. He was wanted out of the state of Connecticut on a parole violation. And we took him at gunpoint. He had 2 loaded weapons, both stolen from different communities here in Chittenden County. And he's only one that comes up here. There's other people that come up here. We need to focus on those type of people and push the, you know, he was upset that he went to jail that week because he was told, if you go to Vermont, you don't go to jail. So I need somebody to go out there and start talking to businesses, do follow-ups, because like we were talking the last time, I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but tomorrow is the last day of Officer Bouffard's platoon. So if he catches a case tomorrow, like at 6 o'clock in the evening, he's off for the next 3 days. We have nobody to follow that up. If it needs to get statements, it needs follow-up, maybe it's a serious felony. You know, we've had people that, you know, we've found in vehicles that were deceased, and, you know, the officer catches it, we had no detective, you know, people need to follow up, identify these people. You can't do it on a patrol shift when maybe it's only you and the sergeant on it, and you and an officer on, because we can't backfill the position, and I can't have you leave the town to follow. It's not just the retail theft, it's beyond the retail theft, you know, and work with people, work with, you know, organizations to try to find places for these people to go and get treated, you know, and that's what we want to do. But retail theft is the big thing, and it's an organized retail theft. And I would love to try to get that taken down. We've had a lot of stories, but I just don't have the bodies to spend hours and hours on it and take them away from a shift. I can dedicate somebody in detectives to do that.
that's great, that's what I want to hear, yeah.
The big difference is the folks that are in patrol are beholden to the radio, the
Sure.
beckoning call of the radio.
Right.
So when you get that retail theft, we're absolutely going where, you know, when you get somebody on a burglary that may take some more time, the detective is not beholden to that radio, and they do have that extra time that they can spend to solve that, so we can get those successful prosecutions for the things that really do count, that really do affect people. And not that other crime doesn't, but we want to focus that person on the ones that really truly matter the most.
It'll help to get that message out. I think it got diluted with, we need to build our department, we need something for the officers, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, and here's the detective who's gonna do paperwork. So we really need to, if we're gonna support this, because this is a tough year to ask this town for anything, we need to be able to articulate how it's going to actually make a difference. So thank you for that, that helps.
Chief, I don't want to take up too much time, but real quick, that in the 90s and early aughts, I guess that's what they're called, the drug distribution situation, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but my recollection from working in this field in the 90s was that a lot of drug runners would create their own network in Vermont. They would have a large supply of, back then it was cocaine, and then it would go out, and then they would build a distribution ring as they went. With the drug situation now, because the retail cost of heroin in Vermont is so much higher than it is in other cities. You can buy retail in New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Springfield, Mass, and then come up here and couch surf for 48 hours and make a massive profit, and by the time law enforcement knows that person is there, they're gone. Contrasting that slightly anyway with the organized retail theft, that is an organization. They are directing people. These are the kinds of goods that I want you to steal. This is how I want you to do it. This is where, you know, there are people that you can go up the chain, and that's the way drug interdiction worked in the 90s. Is you would intervene or arrest with the lowest person who was dealing, flip them, and go up the chain until finally you had people who were pretty high up. And that's not the case necessarily with drug stuff anymore, but with the retail theft stuff, which is in many ways feeding people's habits by giving them the money to buy the drugs, that a detective would be able to apply him or herself to at least that component of it.
Right. You know, you got to start at the ground level. You know, some of the people that we do grab, sometimes they'll have a piece of paper and they'll spell out Milwaukee for them and what type of Milwaukee tools and all that. Or if they figure that if they give up something quick, we'll let them go. But it's always pretty much the case these days, is that they've been told, come out here, go to the store, this is what we want, and how many we want.
Thanks.
You know, we had a guy I grabbed probably a month ago that at 8 o'clock in the morning came out of Walmart with a very 55-gallon storage bin full of Legos, walking down the street carrying it on his head. Grabbed him, got him, we arrested him, and he goes, yeah, that's the choice right now. They want Legos. So yeah. I'm not sure where he went afterwards, if he turned around and tried to find another store selling Legos, but again, so that was probably almost $1,000 worth of Legos.
Wow.
And it's those stories, you know, but it's a constant thing, you know, when you refer to the person by their first name now because you've had so many interactions, you know. But you know, like I said, this morning 4:30 we started. So,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome.
Greetings, welcome.
You can share your presentation, Chief, if you
You have it. Thanks so much, Eric. Great. I thought the police department would be quick.
Yeah.
Just going to pull up my notes that are underneath the presentation here so I can follow along.
just as well, Chief Collette's getting ready, you know, just as looking at our numbers from our original budget, and Chair and I worked to design, you know, public safety discussions this evening, was looking at police and fire budgets of our overall operating budgets, about half, $7.2 million. Core public safety service. We offer 24/7 police, fire, and EMS service to our community. Increases that were in that original draft budget were about 65%. The overall increase was tied to police and fire departments. I shared this around, you know, development of the prior version of the budget, but these costs to deliver these 24/7 services are increasing. In Williston, we're just a handful of communities in the state that can provide this 24/7 service for these critical public safety areas. We've built the capacity to provide that level of service to meet the demand, looking to meet those needs moving ahead. And service delivery of this sort looks very different in other communities, and many of those pay a greater tax rate than the way it is in Williston right now. It's understanding, you know, there's been a lot of media coverage just on emergency services in the state and capacity to provide those, and some towns that are all volunteer or don't have a police department, and a very different type of environment than what we've built in Williston. Just reminding folks watching at home just of the context of.
Thanks, Manager Wells. Aaron Collette, your fire chief, thanks for having me here again to join you. Really want to take the opportunity to provide some education, and I think probably for the majority of you folks, you've heard this before. My hope is that people at home are going to tune in and watch this, and if they had some questions, that maybe through this presentation that they can maybe better educate themselves on what happens at the fire department. The first slide that I show you here is that of the fire station. So we're very fortunate to have a beautiful facility, and I think in some ways it provides a false sense of security. And what I mean by that is you see all the apparatus and you see all the bays and you see the grandeur of it. But what maybe the public doesn't understand is that at any given time, there may be only 5 firefighters assigned to that fire station. So that's the minimum staffing that we have in there. So we staff the engine and the ambulance out of there. We'll get into that here in a minute. If we can have the next slide, please. Services that we provide primarily our number one incident response is advanced life support through our ambulance. So EMS is our bread and butter. We have 1 staffed ambulance when we're at minimum staffing levels. But we have other reserve ambulances that are equipped but not staffed. We also provide fire suppression, hazardous materials scene mitigation, motor vehicle crash mitigation, including extrication of patients from those motor vehicle crashes, fire alarm responses, investigation system restoration for commercial fire alarms, technical rescue, including ropes, water, and ice. Community risk reduction, which is about educating our public and looking at ways to prevent illness and injury for our public, both in the traditional sense that you may think about reaching out to children in the public schools, about fire safety, but also in our elderly community as older adults enter into the community. We can look at fall prevention or other ideas there where we can try to limit our risk, not only for call liability, but to keep them safer in their home. We also have a public information officer program and robust social media campaigns that are staffed by our captain. Next slide, please. This is the organizational chart for the department. Myself sit at the top. I obviously answer to the manager and you folks. I have a deputy who works with us. The deputy's in charge of really fire prevention activities and also code enforcement and being out. It works hand in hand with the state, the Division of Fire Safety. He also works to manage the call staff at a high level. We have a single call staff lieutenant and our call staff firefighters, which is kind of an ebb and flow number, and it keeps dwindling. So we'll build it up and we'll lose them to other departments. So, but the meat and potatoes really falls in our career staff. We have a captain who works Monday through Friday, weekdays, and we have 3 shifts that work 24 hours on and 48 hours off. Each shift is led by a shift lieutenant, and at a minimum 4 firefighters. We have ideally 6 firefighters assigned. Unfortunately, today we're carrying vacancies on all of those shifts for career firefighter spots. We find that we're competing against neighboring departments to fill those vacancies. This next slide shows you the breakdown of incident responses for the calendar year of 2023. Again, I told you our bread and butter was EMS, was 1,600 EMS calls, 44 fire calls. I won't continue to read down through there, but 2,324 runs. As we keep to see this every year, we see the number of calls increase. Just as an example, and I appreciate data. The manager understands how I appreciate data. We have a robust new records management software, so I like to pull data from there. And I wish I could figure out a trend, but there isn't necessarily a trend on our time of day, the day of week, or anything like that, other than to say that around 1 in the morning we are slow, but it starts picking back up around 6 in the morning. So there's a bit of a break in there, but most of the other time. As an example, since 4:30 this afternoon or 4:20 this afternoon, the on-duty shift has been on 7 runs in the last, I think we're approaching 4 hours. I lost track of time here now. you know, it's so erratic, and so that's why that career staff is important, because the availability of our call staff is unpredictable, and we really depend on them to be able to answer the call. This is just a year-to-date snapshot. This was through March 28th. On the next slide, thanks, Eric. Just to show you that the trend is continuing, so we can almost look at this first quarter, and we're still headed right in that direction to likely exceed around 2,400 runs if we continue on this trajectory. Here's the past 3 or 4 years, of incident responses to show that growth. And as many of you know, when I first came to the department in 2020, my analogy would be it looked a little bit like the Wild West. You had a single person riding the engine when you're at minimum staffing and 2 people on the ambulance. We worked with a third-party consultant, AP Triton. They came back and they made recommendations on an immediate increase in the career staffing of the organization. That would led us to hire 9 additional staff. That recommendation, that document, much like the law enforcement document that Colonel Baker did, suggested that the department continue to grow over the next 5 years. And so we are seeing the trend where the demand for service increase, where that staffing really means, are we going to be able to meet that demand for service, or are we going to leave calls unanswered? One of our larger challenges we have here on the next slide is this concurrent call issue. So the blue shaded areas on each one of those columns represents the number of calls that we have where our units are already on a call and committed. So around 20% of the time, we're already out on one call when a second call comes in. And so when we watch this, who answers those calls? When the minimum staffing level is above 5 personnel, we have a bit of an ability Monday through Friday with the captain, the deputy, or myself to backfill either the ladder truck or the ambulance, wherever that next run is. So we can have a driver for that ambulance and then a patient care provider. But when we're below those, when we're at minimum staffing levels, we don't have the ability to staff those other pieces. And then we often rely on mutual aid from outside agencies. Next slide just simply shows you the staffing here, stuff that I've already talked about. But what I wanted to point out on this slide is that all of our career staff are all licensed, and the minimum licensure is EMS is the EMT basic. The majority of the staff are advanced providers, including a handful of paramedics on our staff. Their roles and their ability to serve our community at that level is really second to none, right? It is the premier level of EMS that you could expect. And that's what I would want for you, that's what I want for our family, and that's what you should expect of your fire department. This next slide just shows a little bit about our call staff, where we do have the 3 shifts that are authorized to 7 positions. We have 3 career vacancies, but the call staff, we only have 11 rostered, and actually the manager doesn't know this. I had another call staff member come in today and announce their pending resignation, so we're going to be down at least 2 other positions here, so that's going to dwindle as they're moving on into career service outside of Williston. There's limited availability and there's no prediction of their availability. What we found is rather than move a respond from home model, we've actually endorsed a ride out and pull a shift model where they could sign up for 12-hour shifts, and then we know that they're there and available. And so they're in the station, they're working beside the career staff. A lot of the times really the career staff is mentoring them, and that's a feeder into the organization to try to anticipate if we do have more career vacancies that we can use call staff to come into there, because we've trained them and put them into the career spots. Unfortunately, our call staff has limited EMS licensure at this point. I would say less than 4 people have EMS licensure of the call staff, so they're not able to staff the ambulances. Again, so just to show you a little bit about what that looks like, the primary engine is staffed every day with 3 people. The rescue is staffed with 2, and then the reserve pieces that sit in the rest of those bays in the station don't necessarily have staffing. When we have the career staff, the deputy, the captain, or myself there, or greater than the 5 career staff on duty, we're able to either staff ladder 4 or rescue 2, that second ambulance, so we can address that concurrent call issue. So that's why the importance of having more than 5 people on a shift and available to respond. Just a little bit about critical tasking. Critical tasking is really how we look at how job tasks are performed in the fire department, who is responsible for what, and that's what makes us an effective team. If you want to go to the next slide for me, Eric. As an example, cardiac arrest, you probably have seen, when we teach lay person CPR, it's one person doing compressions and one person doing respirations with a bag mask or artificial respiration. Well, that's great, but when we're coming in with the ability to actually convert that patient's arrhythmia. And so we can apply defibrillation, we can apply advanced cardiac life support medications to those patients. And then we need a team lead. So when we look at a cardiac arrest, yes, they probably teach that to lay citizens, but we're coming in as an extension of the hospital. And we have the tools and equipment on our apparatus to give you the best chance at survival by coming up with this 5-person team. And that's where it's important to have that level of staff. A single person, a single firefighter performing CPR is not effective. Looking at motor vehicle crashes, as you heard Chief Foley speak of, those numbers continue to increase. We've been faced with a number of very severe motor vehicle crashes recently. He spoke of the one on Monastery Hill as an example. There were 5 patients that we transported out of there. We had 4 mutual aid ambulances. We had a complex extrication of the injured driver who was trapped inside of the car. We managed that scene, and we had all patients off of that scene in less than 26 minutes. You won't find that in a rural area in the state of Vermont. Okay. When the snow squall hit us a couple of weeks ago and we had the tractor-trailer truck go across Interstate 89 northbound on French Hill, the deputy, the engine and ambulance were committed on an initial call. The deputy and myself staffed our engine 2, which has extrication capability, and en route to that call, the dispatcher updated via state police that a second tractor-trailer had just crashed into the first one. The deputy's been on the fire department for 24 years. He says it's the first time in his career that he's gone the wrong way down the interstate, especially down French Hill with 2 inches of snow, into a blind car crash. We did that with education. We did that with technology. We utilized Waze. We understood what our liability was. We knew that traffic wasn't coming up through there, so we could enter that safely. We were getting reports from the ambulance that was primary ambulance on that, which was Richmond Rescue. Richmond Rescue told us they're at least a quarter mile from the initial crash scene backed up, and they can't see the original crash, but there's multiple other crashes. I believe there were 6 crashes, 6 vehicles that made contact in that chain of crash. Firefighter Wells, who is joined here behind me, he walked the length of that to triage all of the patients up to the original crash scene with another firefighter to make sure that we hadn't missed anybody in that length. You can't perform these level of services with minimum staffing, right? With poor staffing. We need to have people to be able to mitigate that scene. We ended up with 3 mutual aid ambulances on that crash. During that crash, there was, again, the concurrent call issue. While we were out there, we requested mutual aid assistance from the Essex Junction Fire Department. Essex Junction couldn't get an initial crew, and we had a second crash that occurred on Route 2. We ended up with a engine company from the City of South Burlington Fire Department, and the primary ambulance came from the Burlington Fire Department because that was the next closest ambulance out of the old North End. So when we talk about how fragile the system can be on a given day, you take something like the interstate highway as an example, that we're stealing resources from one another. It's great that we have these mutual aid compacts and relationships because we train together, we work together, we practice this together. But at some point, that responsibility becomes that of the local municipality. And when the demands of service are there, we should be able to meet that demand for service and not have to rely on a mutual aid more than we should, more than expected. Critical tasking for structural fires. The National Fire Protection Association has two documents, a 1710 document and the 1720 document, which again were referenced in the AP Triton report. Essentially for us in our setting, it says we need to have 10 people on that incident scene within 8 minutes or less on a 2,000 square foot home for our jurisdiction. We have a difficult time doing that. We may get that if we're fully staffed and it's a daytime fire. But certainly it's not something we're able to meet, and we're not measuring that with much success right now. Next slide, please. I told you that we had a new records management software, so this data is out of that new product. So we began entering data into that product on January 1 of this year. And so one of the metrics that we were able to extract out of that is the response time for emergency medical incidents within the town of Williston. So from the time that we receive the call until the time we show on location, the average so far this year for the first arriving unit that has medical capability is 4 minutes and 39 seconds. The bullet that you see down below that is from the National Institutes of Health that says the optimal response time threshold for survival to hospital discharge for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is 6.2 minutes. So we have the ability to meet that when we have our ambulance staff, when it's a Williston Fire Department vehicle responding to that scene. Conversely, I'll ask the manager to show the next slide. And so when we go outside of the community, and what I'm going to ask you is, we don't have the data from the other agencies, but what we have is our response time data to those other communities, and this is what it's showing so far. So when we go to the city of South Burlington, the time of dispatch to the time we arrive on location is 11.45 minutes. So we can infer that it would take the same time for them to come back into our community. Richmond at 12 minutes, down into Heinsberg, which they don't have an ambulance, so that really kind of falls a little bit there. But Essex Town over 10 minutes, and then the Junction at 11 minutes. So the three agencies there that are on that graph that have ambulances all exceed a 10-minute response time. When you look at our data, and we were in that 4+ minute time, and it's certainly sub 6.2 minute, it matters that we have the staff here in our community. You have your best chance of survival if your Williston Fire Department unit is in the state and available. And this is just one of the significant fires that actually the same shift, the two gentlemen behind me were both on this incident on Pumpkin Hill. A lot of credit goes to early notification, but this was a beautiful home that was saved because of the efforts of the homeowner and the efforts of the fire department to keep that loss at a very minimal. Otherwise, it would have been a several million-dollar loss. I just want to take a minute, if I could, on a note of personal privilege. I had a discussion about what is a firefighter, and I wanted to just read something here, if I may. It says, many of you, and I hope there was going to be a crowd here, but I'm kind of speaking, I guess I'll speak to the select board. I said, many of you here in the crowd have a vision in your head of what the paradigm may look like of a firefighter. I'm guessing that each of you are focusing on a traditional connotation of a person dressed in firefighting clothing with a helmet who sprays water from a fire hose into burning buildings, climbs ladders, and wields an axe. Well, that may have been what the historical firefighter looked like, but I assure you the position has changed. When we speak of firefighters today, specifically your Williston firefighters, you cannot define their roles or responsibilities in a single sentence. You see, your firefighters, of course, are trained in fire suppression, alarms, and firefighting techniques, but they're also expertly trained emergency care providers who have both clinical and life experiences serving our public in their time of need. They're an extension of the hospital emergency room. From the treatment of complex multisystem trauma, cardiac, stroke, difficulty breathing, endocrine emergencies, anaphylaxis, and everything between, your firefighters deal with these situations every day. Increasingly, they're faced with patients who are experiencing mental health crises, who are suicidal, threatening self-harm, or even threatening to others. Your firefighters are trained in the detection and mitigation of hazardous materials spills and leaks. With hundreds, if not thousands, of chemicals located in or traveling through our community every day, we must be on the cutting edge of hazmat mitigation to ensure that we keep our public safe from harm. Your firefighters are trained to address complex technical rescue incidents, such as ice and cold water, rope rescue, advanced vehicle extrication, including that from commercial vehicles. A portion of your firefighters are trained in swift water rescue, flood water rescue, confined space, trench, and structural collapse rescue. In the firehouse, they are housekeepers, cooks, IT specialists, mechanics, and carpenters. They work every day to maintain the station that you allow them to work in to keep it orderly and well kept. When off duty, they proudly carry the titles of husband, wife, father, mother, brother, sister, or loving partner. You may have heard me say this before, so bear with me, but when the public calls 911, they don't do so to schedule an appointment. Your firefighters may in fact be one of the last remaining services that you can summon and receive an immediate response, regardless of the situation found. It may be as simple as showing the homeowner how to shut off the water in a leaking toilet, or it may be as complex and as difficult of having the responsibility of informing a family of the passing of their loved one. I'm sure that some of you are thinking we don't need the firefighters. I would challenge that opinion, for the paradigm is likely skewed. Perhaps that childhood vision of what a firefighter is still sits there. I will assure you that the role of today's firefighter has changed. I was trying to best capture what today's firefighter might be described at in a few words, and I landed on this. Today's firefighters are truly ambassadors of humanity. Ambassadors who, in the public's time of need, show up, work collectively to make things better, and we should celebrate this. For there are few professions that continue to serve others as much as your firefighters do. Gladly answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Questions from the board?
I had one, but I can't ask it now. That was great. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Could you go back to the slide that was like the third one in or something? It had the number of incidents last year or something? This might be a data question or just something to think about going forward.
2020 had 1,900
That was.
Yep.
I always have this question because I'm amazed at how often I see our fire trucks out with only 44 fires. So the big number there is rescue and emergency medical services. And to me, that's kind of two categories, because if I call because my husband's having a heart attack, you don't send a fire truck.
We do. So it comes back to that critical tasking slide.
Yeah.
So all of the roles that come out there, so it's not, we don't ever leave a single provider or just the two providers on that call. So the situation found, the report that we get through the dispatch without a CAD, right, without a computer-aided dispatch, so we don't have the ability to filter that.
Okay.
So, right, so a stub toe, it would make sense, hey, we could just deal with the driver, the ambulance itself, they can deal with the stub toe. But for a difficulty with breathing call or an unresponsive person, we assume those calls to be the highest risk, and that's cardiac arrest, where we need all of those players involved. So the people to manage the airway, to manage the drugs, the person to run the lead as the crew chief, somebody to drive the ambulance, and then someone to worry about how you're gonna clear that patient out and patient movement back to the ambulance. So in a lot of ways, it's a risk management tool, one, to prevent injury for our staff. The population, unfortunately, is getting larger, and so we have heavier patients. So we actually utilize the extra staff to reduce our liability with moving patients. The idea of crew resource management means that you have more eyes on a scene. So if I'm mentoring a new emergency medical technician in the role of crew chief, I may be there and pick up on other clues that I'm seeing or signs and symptoms of that patient that provider is not. So when we run that tiered approach, we have the higher likelihood of catching those illnesses because of the number of providers that are there and the level of experience that are there. So it's a team approach. It allows us, as an example, last week we had a very complex mental health patient. If we had, mental health would seem like we could de-escalate that and use 2 providers, right, and not have the engine company. We actually used all staff on scene that day. We worked in concert with law enforcement, who did an outstanding job. And again, I'll echo what they said about the body cams, because that would have been a great call to utilize the body cams for limitation of liability for that scene, because it documented it. But in that scene, there was a collaboration between fire and EMS. And we used all hands there. Everyone had a role, and it was orchestrated with all of the people there to make sure that that patient was dealt with in a very professional manner. They were safe, and they were getting the best care that they could do. And I'll publicly shout out to Jeremy, who was the lead provider on that, who did an outstanding job on that very complex call. It was a simple mental health call that we needed all hands on deck for. And so, in the absence of knowing, is it a stub toe, we give that patient the best option. So if the units aren't committed, that engine will respond right from there to take that second run to initiate care, because the engine company is also set up with all of the advanced life support equipment that the ambulance is. So including the 12-lead monitor and all of the advanced drugs are sitting on the engine as well.
Other questions? Chief, I forwarded you an email that I received wondering why there are so many firefighters and when we don't have that many fires in town. And I think that your explanation tonight was directly on point, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for letting us, again, education. If you want to see anything, stop by the firehouse, speak to the staff. We'll be glad to help out, answer any questions in the meantime.
Great. Thank you. So the hour is getting late. We're not going to reach a resolution on any of this stuff tonight, obviously, but what I'm wondering is if it would be a good exercise for people to take no more, and again, given the hour, no more than a minute or two, if you are comfortable with putting out possible budget decisions that you would be throw out for consideration now. And again, we can take up the reasons for those at our next marathon session next week. But anyway, it's a proposal, not anything else. What do people think?
I think give staff some ideas about where we're coming from. Maybe, hopefully, we'll have some agreement on the things that we propose forward to increase the budget and decrease the budget.
Hearing no objection, and given that you were the one who spoke first.
And I'd be happy to do that. So I would support a budget that is an increase of 6.73%. Reduces the expenditures by $435,000, which relates to a 2% decrease in the proposed budget that we had that was defeated. Among other things, I would support the 18th sworn police officer starting in January, as well as the body cams and tasers. I would not support the decrease in the COLA for staff. I would not support leaving the firefighters vacant, and I would not support reducing staff in town staff at all.
Well, you've hit on the number. I agree with the number. I like that that case of a 2% tax rate. The 435, I'd just as soon apply 100 of revenue and do the 335. I think that's achievable. While I think we need an HR director, I think this is not the year to add that. So if staff feels they need to add something back for a patch for this year, that would be okay with me too. Thank you very much for all the, I know how hard it is to put this kind of lists together. That's a lot of work. I think there's a few things on here that are just, cutting the 4th of July fireworks is just, see if we can get away from not cutting that one. But otherwise, I think that's where I would go. 335,000 out of expense. I'd like to keep the detective as well.
I would like to support the body cams and tasers. I think that's a good insurance. I believe it's necessary. Support the police detective, taking care of the root cause of a lot of the retail theft and what's going on in town. I think it might make everybody's job a lot easier. I do not support reducing town staff. I think we understand with other departments that once we lose staff members, it's really difficult to get them back. I'd like to keep, their valuable people that we have. I agree with Jean. This is not the year to add an HR director.
Okay.
I'm tired. I can't remember everything right now.
No, I think I'm on the same page. I agree. I think that actually that 6.73 is kind of exactly where I had, in looking at the numbers, kind of targeted. It may seem like a small thing, but I also do not support taking the July 4th fireworks out of the budget, primarily because I see it as a community building event, and I think that the fastest way to have a healthy community is to have events and things where communities get together and celebrate together. So, in terms of the police detective position, support the body cams and tasers, and would be wholly unsupportive of in any way taking the COLA or merit for non-union staff. We have such an amazing staff here in town, and I want them to know how much they are appreciated, and that is deserved.
Right.
And I would actually echo fundamentally what Terry said, but I'd put the number at 335 as Jean recommended. No leaving firefighter positions vacant. I think we do need the detective. Basically, I was listening to Terry thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. Yes, I agree with that. So that's my ditto, except for the 335.
With the we're not going to go through every single line item tonight, but I would be sad if we can't give the library their $4,000 to expand their hours too. But that's a little thing. Figure out how to do that.
So does that?
What was last year's town increase? Remember?
Percentage-wise, it was around
3.5.
Yeah, tax rate around 3.5 cents. Bottom line, it's around 7-ish maybe. But I'll look back and see. It was around there was an inflation metric that it was above. I remember, but I think it was around 7% expense increase.
So we're in line with last year.
Yeah, I would say in that it might even be a little bit lower than it was last year in the sevens. I think we were in the 7s last year. I can confirm that next week here.
Big increase in CPI this past year.
Yeah, and we tend to look at things on a 24-month window as well. So we see those. Inflation's been cooling a bit, but we take that 24-month picture. So part of that we'll see how the outlook goes in the future, but we've seen the last period start to cool a little bit for inflation there.
So does what we've said give you enough guidance to come back
enough guidance, we could have given him 5 different answers.
No,
Give him
you know,
one.
appreciate that
Take the
there's
week off.
alignment from the board here. Initially, it makes the task ahead easier to get to a conclusion. So really, what we've kind of outlined here, overall, I'm not really counting any below my new major items in the budget. I just illustrated those to the COLA, delaying filling positions, reducing the workforce, just to show if we were to get to level funded, the board have to make decisions going into that realm at some point. But we had about $500,000 identified in reductions, and some are like anticipated from the board, not going to support. Just numbers are out there just to illustrate possibilities. Not including the HR director, that's 100,000. I think to get to that 335 number, I don't think we're far away. We might even be there right now. Part of the things are some of these other components like the ERF funding, the community organizations funds, Lake Iroquois funds, some of these smaller details. So what we can do for next week is kind of clean this up with the feedback from tonight, kind of see where we are, building that an extra 100,000 of revenue from fund balance here. So the pathway might be formulated once we're a little more awake and clean this up a little bit for the board. I think we may be there, close to being there right now. There may be a discussion with some of these things. Maybe there's some slight reductions to think about to get us there if we're not there already.
Great.
Next Wednesday we'll come back with that, and I guess initial discussion on timeline here. Kind of think about that as well.
So I think you were gonna check to see if moving it in a week was possible, facilities-wise, right? And
Yeah.
then we're gonna think next week about when that we can be
We'll
ready.
get that answer, and then I'm just thinking how the board wants to have any public, the public feedback component. I know that's important to the board, and if trying to.
Well, it kind of has to be the 16th because the next week is the school's closed, and so there'll be a lot of people out of town.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so I think regardless, it makes sense to start kind of warning a public hearing feedback on the working draft of the budget before it's warned. We stick with that.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, it's a little late.
No.
Escaping me, so that sounds like a good plan.
Okay, so that takes care of that agenda item. Next, manager's report.
thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you
for
all
everything.
so very much.
Good luck
Yeah,
tomorrow.
thanks for everything.
Stay off the interstate.
Just a couple brief items here. Just legislative update, I provided further testimony about the state police barracks. Consulted with Terry a bit as the House committee, some language. What's in there through the House is to authorize this, prior to authorizing the sale of the police barracks, it's intended the General Assembly to consider a report from the town of Williston next January, or the potential for the town to purchase the property, and if the town desires to purchase the property, potential future uses of the property envisioned by the town. So essentially it buys time for this conversation. We're starting the site analysis component with our consultant here over the next month. The community center component, I don't know if this will make it through the Senate side. There may be a conference committee over this detail, but we felt it was the best we could do with this request. So town's not committed to anything, and this doesn't commit the town to anything. It gives us more time to make a more formalized pitch if we'd like. So, that's where that is. Just update is when the eclipse is Monday. We're going to close town hall at noon that day. We're anticipating a lot of traffic around town. We've done some good staff planning the last couple months on this. We're going to meet that morning to evaluate the situation and just think it's resource-wise, it's traffic, potential for accidents and things of that nature. So it's an exciting event. It's exciting to happen in this corner of the world, but gearing up operationally what that means. The message out to folks, you may be stuck in traffic a bit. The town can only do so much. And I don't anticipate us closing roads and having people out directing traffic. We don't have the staffing or capacity to do that. So think of our class 2 roads, the mountain views, out front here, Route 2A, South Road. People may try to cut through some of the neighborhood roads, Old Stage Road, for example, Brennan Woods, but it's going to be a thing where you may have to wait a while to get where you're going, and it might be good to get where you want to be early and
Stay there.
so
Yeah.
try to get that message out a bit.
Hope people, I've had people comment on your post, so I know they read it. It's like, I have to make sure I have a full tank of gas.
It was good.
I think it's very good,
Yeah,
yeah.
Aaron's done a great job taking the lead on this for us and just getting those tips out there.
Yeah.
Chargers, he's stuck, so.
You still have plenty of glasses downstairs too.
Yeah, plenty of glasses. And then I included in your packet, Green Mountain Transit update. You know, they're certainly having some financial challenges looking ahead here. I was on a call with them last week. You know, the FY26, the concern there is they may need to reduce their services by upwards of 30% based on an impending deficit they're facing. Used a lot of federal money that's running out, but at the same time, fares have been paused, so it's creating this added complexity. So I'm sure we'll have the folks from Green Mountain Transit here throughout the later this year. Part of it is if they do need to reduce services, it plays into the town's assessment valuation because depending on that reduction in services, the towns wouldn't be paying as much into it for reduction in services. So similar exercise the town's thinking about it with its budget. So share with the board to keep you updated, and we'll later this year. But, that's all I have.
Okay, great. Other business?
Wait, is this an upcoming select board meeting list? Is this on your manager's report, or is that other business? Where did I find that?
I think it's in the manager's, the one pager.
And probably select board goal setting is not gonna be on the top of the agenda for our next meeting.
Oh, no.
So.
Yeah, that'll probably be a main discussion.
And did we have the, did you put on the other two schedule where we're gonna have the CJC in, I think, right? Or is that on here? Did I miss it?
I just haven't planned that.
Okay, put it on, if it's
I'll
just
make
on
sure
the
it's
two
on the
schedule,
list,
I just don't
yeah.
wanna
Yeah.
lose track of it, that's all.
Yeah, I'll make sure that's on. I can have a running list of policy items.
Right.
Discussions. I'll make sure that's on there. So other business, a couple, town clerk shared with me some additional tobacco and liquor license renewals, similar to last time, no violations with these, but they trickle in at times. So they're Chef's Corner, the Scale Poke Bar, Goodwater Brewery, CVS Pharmacy, Catamount Golf Course, and tobacco and license for Shaw's. Or consider a license to renew or a motion to renew those licenses for the next term.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Then just to circle us back to executive session discussion on a potential settlement for a zoning violation. Suggestion for the select board to settle Town of Williston versus Hazelton and Stewart. This was a zoning violation for an accessory dwelling that was built over a property line. We have an agreement with the residents to cure this, a fine of $1,500, and an agreement to remove that structure by Labor Day to cure the violation. For the manager entering into that agreement on behalf of the town, a motion is suggested.
Chair would entertain a motion.
I would move that the select board approve the proposed settlement agreement with Mr. Hazelton and Ms. Stewart to resolve the town's zoning enforcement action against them and authorize the town manager to sign the settlement agreement on the town's behalf.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Any other business? None.
I would like to mention that only having 10 things on the agenda fits in my binder nicely. Thank you very much.
Please noted for the record.
For the record, I'm very happy tonight.
So on that note, we should probably adjourn.
I think so.
Okay, so we are adjourned.
Okay.